Eternal Strands. It's one of those games where from the looks of it, you wouldn't imagine that it would be very in-depth in its systems, but this new action RPG from Yellow Brick Games has a lot of things going for it under its imaginary hood. This Tears of the Kingdom meets Shadow of the Colossus love child of a game gives the player a lot of freedom in deciding how to tackle every monster, every giant, or those super annoying freaking ice turtle things, man, they're so annoying. But what the game doesn't really do very well is explain every feature or mechanic that there is here all that deeply, and kind of lets the player figure them out for themselves, of course. And there's quite a few little tips and tricks and all of those little things that a player should know about, that maybe a more hardcore player would know about as well, no doubt, and figure it out on their own. But we're not hardcore gamers on this side of YouTube, broski. We're casuals. We're filthy casuals at that, and we want to just enjoy our games without the hassle of reading through a copious amount of tutorials or trial and error kind of gameplay. We just want to jump in, get shit done, and leave. So this list is exactly that. It's 5 things that every casual or new player should know about Eternal Strands. So let's get on with the first one. Starting the list off, we have Fall Damage. Now look, if you've watched any trailer of the game and seen that you have to fight these big ass arc creatures, as well as a few dragons and some weird triceratops looking dude, on your way to the inevitable extinction of those giant creatures. Scaling these beasts is a very viable tactic and ensures that you can break away pieces of their husk or armor to get to the oh so sweet meat underneath, all the while looking cool as hell doing it, of course. The issue with mounting these giant beings is that your stamina tends to run out pretty fast. After a while, you tend to let go of your gorilla grip, and your fragile ankles, man, once they hit the ground, they usually get twisted and you just take a good old chunk of health off of you, depending on the distance of which you fell, of course. This would normally not be really an issue, but as you only have a few health potions to use and abuse in the game, and the enemies themselves, look, they do tend to hit quite hard, especially the bigger ones later on in the game. The guy with the big hammer, man, these guys hit hard as well. So it's good to know that if you spam your dodge button as soon as you hit the ground, you take less fall damage. The game doesn't really tell you this apart from occasionally during a loading screen, so it's hard to tell if it's an actual feature if you're just playing it as a casual gamer. But broski, if you manage to time your dodge roll just as you hit the ground, you take less or even in some cases 0 damage. Who knew Bryn spends all of her off time just watch those old school parkour videos on YouTube, right? I mean, let's be honest, we've all watched those at some point in our lives. The early 2000s, those were the parkoury times. Don't lie to me, man, I know you. Now, depending on the situation, timing the dodge roll can be tricky because sometimes it can be a bit difficult to kind of gauge the distance and know which height will cause fall damage. So what I did was, like I said, man, just spam the dodge button in the air in anticipation after every jump, and especially one of those jumps where you kind of go and kind of gasp because you don't really know if your ankles are going to forfeit this game or not. Next up, we have the whole fast traveling thing in the game. Now, after the first hour-ish of your experience, you get introduced to loom gates, which allow you to travel between the different realms or worlds, however you want to call it, as well as your hub place thing where you get to pet that moose bison creature, as well as upgrade your gear, of course, and romance all of your compadres. Now, while out in the world, you do collect those materials of different rarities and fighting all manner of creatures, both big and small. Sometimes you need to get back to base all easy peasy without the need to find a loom gate to travel, because let me tell you, broski, there is nothing more fear-inducing than being very low on health and having your inventory full of gold and purple materials. Like, that's the loot, and I love the loot. And having to find a freaking loom gate can be very terribly terrifying. Well, what the game does mention very quickly again, and for the casual gamer that doesn't really pay too much attention to every detail, you might miss that early on in the game you get plomped, or an item gets plomped into your inventory, and this item lets you fast travel whenever, wherever you want. It's weird that the game drops this very important item into your inventory. Look, this fast travel item that you can use it in any situation. Given enough time, you can pull it off. There's a small kind of charge time with it, but you can travel back to home base whenever you want. So man, I figured this one out like 4 or 5 hours into the game. So I used to always just find the loom gate, try to find the closest loom gate, try my best not to get schmacked. So yeah, There you go, you're welcome. This does kind of segue us into the next point, which is that you should definitely be upgrading your base whenever possible. But before we get to that, I do want to mention that if you're enjoying this video and want to support the channel on our push to 1K subscribers, then liking the video and subscribing is like the best way to do so. Of course, my broski, I'd love to have you on board this train to the greatness of the tubes. And it would also help me out a lot in growing this channel and just doing this full time, hopefully someday. But yeah, man, let's get back to the list. As you progress in the game, you get new tiers of upgrades for your band of extremely friendly characters. Like, damn, I can't go one conversation without feeling super happy and motivated. Like, why can't my IRL friends be like this? Am I right? Anyway, to upgrade your base, you talk to the horned Scottish girl next to the main loom gate and use existing materials to turn into salvage, or basically just upgrade points. The salvage, it has zero uses apart from upgrading your base, and you use your precious material to upgrade these stations in your base. So man, it might feel a bit uneasy in using your precious material to upgrade your base, but don't worry, broski, because it's not long before you'll be swimming in purple, blue, and gold materials. My recommendation is just to go ham on it and go into the world, fill up your inventory with as much material as possible, and just turn them into salvage. What helps is the rarer. The more rare the material is, of course, the better, the more scavenge, the more salvage you get from it. I would emphasize on upgrading the Scottish lady station, that was terrible, as well as Lane, the alchemist station too, because the aforementioned one gives you more inventory space on top of being able to pull more materials with you once you inevitably get your lights schmacked out of you. So that's just compounding into the idea that you can upgrade your base faster, of course. Lane also gives you more potions to use and abuse to your liking, and while the other stations are also very useful, I might add, in letting you upgrade your mantle as well as your equipment to higher tier ones. Those two I mentioned are kind of crucial in the early to mid game, or even parts of the late game as well, as the game kind of tends to ask you to collect more items as quests. Now segueing us to the fourth point, I mean, we got through this list quite fast. It's kind of building on the idea of upgrading and crafting higher tier equipment and weapons. You know those sometimes hard to read hammer icons on your map? The very cool looking but weird to read map. Yeah, you should definitely be going to those whenever possible. They always have new armor or weapon blueprints in them. These weapons become super good once the game starts throwing more elemental enemies at you that require the opposite element to defeat, of course. Well, I say that, but all weapons also are very viable because freedom of choice is the name of the game here in terms of what gear you want to use in any given situation. But having different elemental weapons in every slot comes in super handy, and you can just go crazy and have fire everything if you want, man. Who's there to judge? There ain't nobody here to judge. I want to have a fire bow, fire great sword, and a fire sword and shield. I want to do all of that, and I did, and I fared surprisingly well. The good thing about the elemental weapons in general is that they not only dish out elemental damage, but do as well just do physical damage. I mean, it's a sword or a bow or whatever weapon you're using, man, it still hurts because there's a pointy end that you kind of poke your enemies with or swing at them sometimes, and instead you just get this special attack with the elemental stuff that's really cool in general. And I have to stop saying the word element now because I am going crazy. The different armors you find in these hammer icons on the map are also very useful because they do give things like added armor, more health, more stamina, and some skills as well as just resistant to a certain element. Damn it. Now finally we have a more fiddly thing that I pretty much figured out for myself. When you get to one of those map icons or in general are trying to pick something up while in combat or surrounded by enemies, the game throws this in combat icon at you and doesn't really allow you to pick items up until you have dealt with all enemies around you, of course. Now this does not apply to crafting materials or healables, but the more you play the game, you notice that of course enemies do respawn. And as much as I do enjoy the combat in this game, which is one of the highlights, I don't want to constantly be fighting the same group of enemies over and over again. So whenever I was doing this kind of blueprint run or trying to clear the map of hammer icons, I'd often see that the combat limitation is a bit inconsistent because the enemy might be upstairs from you or downstairs, or there might be too many enemies to deal with considering the amount of health you have. It does seem like the in combat icon that you get on this loot or these chests are based on the vicinity to the chest that where the enemy is, and I hope I said that correctly, instead of them being in aggro range on you. So what I often did was just kite the enemies around or using my summon fire little dude to get their attention and just run around in circles spamming the pickup button, and at some point surprisingly the game isn't fast enough to update the icon and I managed to pick these items up and just dip it the hell out of there. Like I said, this is maybe more of an exploit or a glitch and something a along the lines of those things where it's not a full-on feature in the game. You're just being faster than how the icon kind of updates itself. So yeah, look, it's very fiddly. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So it's up to you to decide if you want to use that, but I found that to be very useful, especially when I'm doing those loot runs. Sometimes it's necessary. Any means necessary, man. Am I right? With that being said, that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I hope you did enjoy it, man. I hope these tips and tricks kind of are useful in some way, shape, or form in your gameplay experience, man. Let me know in the comments down below if they were useful, if there are some other pointers that I should know about when playing this game, or if new players are picking it up and watching this video. So man, help them out, of course. Be a broski. If you enjoyed this video, man, like, subscribe, do all that YouTube jazz. I don't really know how to end this video, so click this link, click that link. Enjoy the rest of the videos on the channel, man, on our push to 1K, of course. I've been your broski. I'm signing off right now. Keep on trucking, my dudes. Peace.
I offered you friendship, and you spat in my face.